Welcome to the Perfect Place to Put a Practice podcast by Scott McDonald and DrDemographics.com, the best source of demographic, psychographic, and marketing information for professionals.
Hello, this is Scott McDonald of Dr. Demographics, and we're going to talk about an issue that is, rising somewhat. It's about franchise dental and medical locations. In this time, we're going through a lot of turmoil, and I want to kind of review that and how different companies are making inroads into healthcare practices and making advice as to where they ought to go. Now, remember, Dr. Demographics is primarily a service where we're talking about the facts about a location and the viability of that location to build your practice. Now, sometimes it's going to be with a de novo or start a practice. Others are looking for new locations for existing offices. We're going to talk about something that a lot of people are trying to get into, and that is franchise programs or franchise offices. The idea is, of course, if you can get into an office that already exists or is easy to set up, it will become not quite as big a hassle as you might otherwise have. Risks appear to be lower. And so therefore, why not? A franchise office, how's it going to work out? Now, I'm going to start off by saying you already know franchise companies that are different from each other. They're offering different services. The cost to buy in can be quite different. The range of services that they offer is also extremely unique. Now, with that in mind, let's talk about the pros and cons of franchise healthcare practices. Now, I think the idea has always been wise to try to get the best team possible to set up your practice in a place that will work out, a good site that will make you profitable. There are some pros and cons to what kind of service will work for you and the locations that they're recommending. Now, I ought to say right off the bat, I think franchise practice providers are not necessarily bad demographers, but I don't think they're primary demographers. They would rather kind of go with what everybody is saying about a particular site and then just throw in agreeing with them that that's a good location or a bad location. My experience in looking at practice sites that you might want to go to, I have to say I prefer independence. I prefer you to have a model of practice that is going to work for you particularly, because when you're following somebody else's dream or their model, you may get distracted by things that are not important or things that are dangerous to consider. I'll explain in just a minute. But for the most part, it's a good idea to get research and find facts. I just kind of believe that you ought to do this on your own, but it is certainly practical if a franchise company is going to give you a great price and great wisdom on where to put a practice. Now, in this time of rising risks, and right now we are in a time of incredible risk, of inflated practice values and uncertain profits, doctors have to be more careful than ever that they are making wise decisions. Now, personally, I believe you're always going to be better owning your own practice. And to manage it, I think that's a good idea. In fact, I think the more intimately associated you are with practice management, the better off you're going to be. Now, to avoid problems, I have advocated using an experienced practice broker. Lenders who know your profession are especially helpful. Often they're associated with, a particular aspect of practice. It's a startup dental practice, or they're working on group practices of a specialty type. It's a good idea when you're getting advice from people who've been there and done that. But what about services that deal with franchises? Now, that's a little more difficult because the franchisor will take upon themselves a great deal of responsibility And you often are at a disadvantage by not knowing what they know or following their guidelines. Now, I'm sure you're familiar with franchise practices. These range widely in the services they offer. They also vary in the risks that they require the doctor or owner to assume. They can do everything from hiring staff, finding places to put their office, and negotiated provider contracts, meaning, in other words, the doctor, how much you're paying them, the structure of their compensation. So, in a way, a practice that franchises may do all of this or none of it, but they're not inexpensive and they're not flexible, because for a franchise operator to make money, he's got to make sure that you're following the rules that they've laid down so that they can say, oh, we know you're going to make your money back. There's a lot of risks associated with a franchise practice on behalf of the franchisor and on behalf of the doctor. Risk is going to happen. Now, franchisors may make claims regarding profitability and cash flow while offering accounting, legal management, legal help, management, marketing, and human resources. They are gaining in popularity, I believe, right now because they appear to mitigate risks. Doctors are not prone to want risks. You're not gamblers. Now, once you enter into a contract and pay the associated fees of getting into this practice, you're locked in to doing everything your consultant, your manager, your liaison officer tells you. It's not unlike getting married. You have to trust that they're going to be honest with you. Now, I'm going to be honest with you about this. Most of the franchise operators I know are pretty ethical and pretty competent. That doesn't mean they're perfect, and it doesn't mean that everything they say is going to be true. That's why I kind of like to keep a toe on the floor and make sure that what you're being told about a practice location and the model that you're setting up is going to be true and long-lasting. Now, franchisors make mistakes too, so I don't expect they're going to be perfect, but I want them to do their due diligence. Now, first of all, what is good about a franchise practice? Are there good things about it? Yeah, well, I think there are, in fact. Most practice franchises have a proven track record. That's one of the best things about it. You can look at how they've performed and delivered and how profitable they are. They've done this before. You have the numbers to back up their claims of success. You can always get out of the relationship if they have lied to you, but you got to know if they're lying to you. Your learning curve is often much faster than you think. So setting up a practice is not easy. Finding a location, hiring staff, setting up all the financials that you need to do, that is not an easy thing to do. But I believe it usually happens faster than we think. I think you can learn the business side of practice at a much faster rate than you might think. But that doesn't mean that even though you've been doing it for a while, you don't need outside help. And that's one of the nice things about a franchise. They have a lot of knowledge, experience, and experts to be able to back up their case. Franchises are often scalable. That means that the franchisor can teach you how to grow your practice, how to retain a growing practice, how to manage a growing and even large practice. And that's a good thing. But to do this, they've had to set up systems, and they want to hold to those systems to make sure that they're reliable. But this can be a two-edged sword. Now, I'll explain in a minute. Branding. Now, what I'm saying by this is almost all franchises have a brand. Often they have a name for their business, and you buy into that. And knowing that can be kind of comforting, but also a little risky. Because if the brand isn't doing well, you, through no fault of your own, can get sucked down into the murk. Now, the franchisor has probably done or spent time and money and thought building an image that will take you along a very long time to create and maintain. So they are providing something of value, and it may cost you a lot of money, however, to get into that, but it can short circuit the length of time that it takes to set up a practice and make it profitable. Now, one of the best things about a franchise is the training. Now, you don't have to reinvent the wheel to ensure your success. The franchisor usually has a program to train your staff. They often have operations manuals, scripts, forms that can take a long time to develop, and it could be a very good thing for you. Okay, now I'm going to state that's one of the good things about a franchise. But all this requires compliance on your part, and I mean strict compliance. Because if they say to you, you can make money on our model, you have to hold to all aspects of that model to make it, well, viable, to make it dependable, to make it so that it will work the same way it did in other locations. Now, I'm not saying that's a perfect system, but I'm just saying that's how most franchisors seem to work. Now, what is bad about a franchise? Let's be honest here too. Now, before being too specific, you understand that franchises are not all the same. They have different niches and some invasive regulations in your practice. They can be a little meddlesome or controlling. So the management style, the relationship you have with a franchisor can be, well, something that is not very flexible. And most doctors that I know don't like franchises for that reason. Now, there are many restrictions placed upon a doctor. They should consider it a kind of partnership that will tacitly obligate the practice to certain actions. So if you sign up and you're promoting a brand and you're following a rule or rules that they've set up, policies, if you will, it's going to be tough. And you're going to have to sacrifice both money and freedom in order to make this happen. The franchisor will charge a fee, and sometimes a significant fee. They will demand the practice reports that would normally be proprietary information on revenues, practice records, taxes, etc. Freedom of action and creativity are limited whenever you get into a franchise operation. They want to tell you what to do. Now, it's like having a senior partner or co-owner looking over your shoulder and know you can't hide a thing. They want to look at forms. They're going to have their accountants go through your processes. They want to know everything. Now, that's not unreasonable, but it is invasive and not something that we particularly like doing. Do we? Now, there is a learning curve to practicing in a franchise practice. It takes time to get used to it. Now, before I go on, I want you to understand, I've worked with franchise practices, DMOs, MSOs, all kinds of structures in my nearly 40 years of practice management and promotion. Many doctors report that it is very difficult to get out of a franchise relationship. I'm not an attorney, and so I can't tell you how to do it, but I know that a timeshare condominium is a piece of cake compared to getting out of a franchise. The agreements are all unique, so it's unwise for someone like me to make sweeping generalities about any particular aspect of a healthcare franchise. I'm not going to get into it, percentages and prices. I'm not going to say, oh, this seems like a good idea, or I'd run away from that. The truth is, I don't know every franchise option, but I know enough about them, and I've worked with enough of them that it's kind of a good concept, but there's risks, real risks. Now, as I mentioned, structures are unique. They're going to be different. And I suppose that they can work out well. I know some people who had a franchise healthcare practice, usually emergency care, and well, some network specialty organizations, oral surgeons, orthodontists, and lots of physicians. And some of them stay in their relationships a long time. Most, on the other hand, do not work out well. Generally, I advise against them. Now, it's not because I think they're doing shenanigans or nasty things. It is not due to inherent dishonesty or the value of the agreement, although one must have an attorney and an accountant, both review the obligations very carefully that you're under. In healthcare, it's just not like a regular business. You've got special privileges and obligations that you have to maintain. Now, instead, I have noticed a conflict in the disposition of nearly all doctors, not the franchisor, but all doctors, to balk at control of their practice. In almost all cases, the doctor wants to get out of an obligation that controls them. Now, other business people in other industries can put up with a franchise. I mean, McDonald's or any franchise operation, including realtors, for example, have a lot of obligations, but they can get along with it. But I've seen very few times in which a doctor over a long period of time will think a franchise is a good idea for me. Now, there are reasons why doctors do not like it. The reduction of their profits is not insignificant. Usually, the franchisor is being paid a percentage of the profit, and that bothers a lot of doctors. Now, they feel like they're making a sacrifice, in other words, to pay their franchise fees. Doctors work a long time to become independent and to gain control of their careers. I know it. I've seen it. I've been involved in your schools and training programs. Yeah. In marketing, it is defined as an issue of imbalance of control and power. Meaning by this, the thing that most doctors dislike about franchises is that they don't like having anybody tell them what to do. Now, you may think, well, it's because the franchisor was dishonest or they aren't living up to their... Look, most of the time I've seen them do a good job. But it's hard for doctors to feel, after all the work they put into building up a practice and a patient base, or the potential of doing so, they don't like the idea that someone's going to tell them what to do. You see, doctors, I think you are the biggest issue of why these things don't work out. Good doctors seem to resent the idea that there is someone out there who's telling you what to do, what kind of bandages you should buy, or anesthesia practices, or record keeping. I know that most of the doctors I've worked with want to be in control, and that's a fact. Now, I want to read the tea leaves for a second, and I mean by that, what's going to happen in the future, what's really going to go on here. Now, there are, and this is going to really tick off some people, there are some genders and cultures and personality types that are much better suited to franchises than others. Now, I'm not going to get more specific than that, but I just believe not everybody is cut out to turn over their practice and their livelihood and, their hard work to someone else. And because of this, I don't think franchises work in most cases. Now, that may come across as kind of bad, and I'm sorry. I don't mean to say anything bad about doctors or franchisers or anybody else, but I'm just saying the relationship between the two is more strained than I've seen in other kinds of businesses. That's what I'm really getting at. It doesn't make it any less true, even though it's kind of comes across as bad, that doctors don't like control over their lives and their careers and their futures. But it's true. In nearly 40 years of practice management, working with doctors, I'll admit I could be wrong. I could be wrong about what I'm saying about doctors. Maybe doctors are different now than they used to be. But in that 40-year period of time, I've seen certain commonalities, and the franchise is not a good model for most doctors. Still, you should know if you're an exception to the rule, and you may be. It may be that you work well with other. Now, I've seen lots of doctors who've been in the military, who've gone into private practice later on, and they have a natural sense of cooperation that's much greater than what we see in private practice. They're better candidates for this kind of thing. But there's some people, as soon as someone says, no, we have to do this, they immediately react badly. Now, Dr. Demographics helps people figure out what the best place to practice for you for the kind of practice you want to have. And that includes not only the kinds of patients you might have, but the kinds of services you might want to offer. I have generally tried to steer clear of advising doctors too much about what is right in general. I prefer to say the best way to do it is to find out what the doctor wants to do and to find locations thereafter that have a population that fits to what you're looking to do, what you're trying to accomplish. That is why at Dr. Demographics, we're not trying to tell you what to do, but rather report on what we found in the areas that you might want to go to and what locations are going to deliver the population that will work best in your case. You can visit us at drdemographics.com. We have several different kinds of reports. Some are very inexpensive, some are more free form. The practice consultation form might work particularly well if you're thinking about using someone to give you advice on what to try to do. Our number is 800-849-0499.